In this lecture, I want to show you how to conduct a bifurcation analysis of the Wilson-Cowan model. And in doing so, I'll also show you how to use the workspace interface to semi-automate that process. But before we go on, let's just recap the Wilson-Cowan model. So it is a model of, it's a neural mass model of two lumped populations of neurons. There is a population of excitatory neurons and a population of inhibitory neurons. And these two populations are recurrently connected with each other and with themselves. And the model represents the mean firing rate of each of these particular populations. So UE is the mean firing rate of the excitatory population, and likewise UI is the firing rate of the inhibitory population. And those firing rates are governed by a classic sigmoidal firing rate function which relates the strength of the synaptic bombardment of that population with its firing rate response. Now, the fun thing about the Wilson-Cowan model is that you can apply a constant injection current to the excitatory cells, and the model will respond with these spontaneous oscillations in the excitatory population and the inhibitory population. And because there's only two state variables in this particular model, it's quite convenient to analyze that in the phase plane, where the oscillations appear as this limit cycle here in black. The green are the localized. Now we can analyze this further by ramping our parameter J and seeing how that affects the onset of this oscillation or this limit cycle. And that is indeed what a bifurcation diagram is. So here in the bifurcation diagram, we're ramping up the amplitude of our stimulus J, and what we're plotting is the envelope of the oscillation in UE, in the excitatory population. And we can see there's no oscillation at all until the stimulus reaches a critical value, and then the oscillation emerges as a Hopf bifurcation. So we'll go through this in the model itself, and I'll show you how to simulate this onset of a limit cycle in the Wilson-Cowan model. So you'll find the Wilson-Cowan model in the usual place in the models directory. There it is, right there, wilson-cowan.m. Run help on that. Wilson-Cowan help Wilson-Cowan, and it tells us a little bit about the equations, which you can also read about in the graphical interface. So I'll skip those. The important part here is that we construct the model without any input parameters, and then we pass the model into BD GUI. And you may have noticed this before. You can save the output parameter of the BD GUI, and that is actually a crucial point for using the workspace interface. The workspace interface is actually a handle into the graphical user interface that allows you to pass values in and out of it. So let's just work through that a bit more. Wilson-Cowan system structure, GUI equals BD GUI sys. Here it is starting up as usual, taking its time. Okay, so here's us two state variables, E and I, the excitatory and the inhibitory populations, or the firing rate of those populations, our weight parameters, our threshold parameters, and JE is the stimulus applied to the excitatory neurons, and JI is a stimulus applied to the inhibitory neurons. Well, we only care about JE. The two tails are time course parameters for the two state variables, time course of excitation and inhibition. Alright, so let's just look at the time portrait. So we can see we've started from random initial conditions. The stimulus is 0 and the two populations have just returned to rest. So let's get rid of those transients by clicking the evolve button, and from now on I'll just be looking at the steady state solutions and ignoring the transients. Let's also have a look at the phase portrait. We'll put the vector field on so we can see the vector field, and we'll put on the null clines as well, because that shows us where the steady state is. Just a reminder that the null cline for the I state variable shows us where in phase space that the I value is not changing, and likewise the null cline for the E variable shows us the position in space where E is not changing. And of course, where they both cross, neither variables are changing, which means we have a fixed point. Just quickly, this particular model has an auxiliary panel as well. Now, auxiliary panels are for model-specific plotting functions. There may be many given in a model. This one only has one. It's the compound firing rate, which is essentially E plus I. That just represents the net firing rate of all the neurons in that neural mass combined. You might use that if you want to model a local field potential, say. Anyway, let's get back to the time portrait and start ramping up this injection current into JE. This injection current into the excitatory neurons, and we should see the onset of oscillations pretty soon. I'm just ramping it up. Here we go. So oscillations have emerged, and the more I increase JE, the larger these oscillations become. And if we switch over to the phase portrait, we'll see that oscillation as a limit cycle. It's a little bit rough, so let's switch to ODE 23. That should give us a smoother trajectory. Alright, let's go the other way. Let's start dropping JE down, and we'll see that limit cycle moving downwards as that cubic shaped null cline starts moving down. And eventually we'll return to rest. Now at this point I'm going to slide my time slider. Actually, to hell with it, I'm going to extend my simulation to 1000 milliseconds, and I'm just going to plot the last 200 milliseconds, so from 800 to 1000, just to eliminate these transients. You can see in the phase portrait those transients are now gone, and I'll actually uncheck them. So transients off, just so that we're plotting a steady state. I'm also going to introduce a new panel. I'm going to introduce the Bifurcation 3D panel. So that's a panel for plotting a bifurcation diagram in 3 dimensions, but 2 dimensions are the state variables and 1 dimension is the bifurcation parameter. So here it is here. All the 2 state variables are E, so E is on the vertical axis, I is on the horizontal axis, and on this axis here the parameter, the bifurcation parameter, is currently WEE. We want to switch that to our parameter of interest, which is JE. Okay, and while we're here I'll just turn those transients off there as well. So let's just ramp our stimulus parameter again, and we can see that limit cycle plotted versus the bifurcation parameter JE. Okay, so this is our, whoops, gone too far. This is our bifurcation diagram emerging. It shows us the relationship between the stimulation parameter JE and the limit cycle in the phase portrait. And of course we can keep doing this manually and building up our bifurcation diagram this way, or we can use the workspace interface to automate that process. So remember I was talking about this GUI handle here. This handle is a handle to that graphical application, and we can look inside and we can see we have access from the command line to the parameters of the model, the lag parameters if they're relevant, if you're doing a delay differential equation. var naught is the initial conditions, var s is the variables in time, so the time signals according to the time steps t. T value is this time value here, and so on and so on. We can even change the whole buttons and the evolve buttons using this workspace interface. So let's look at the parameters. GUI.par, it shows us the parameters of the model here, and I could change if I wished. GUI.par.je, I'll make that 0. Keep your eye on that value there. JE is currently 3. Let's assign it 0, and you can see it's changed there, and the model has recomputed. Okay, so JE back down to 0, and you can see the value right there. So of course we can ramp that with the simple for loop, and that's the beauty of the workspace interface. So let's say for JE equals 0 in steps of 0.1 up to 4, GUI.par.je equals JE end. So this loop is assigning different values of JE to the graphical interface from 0 to 4, and when I hit return it will start ramping through automatically. Okay, we can see it moving up. We switch to the time portrait, we can see things changing. We can see the value here changing in the control panel. We can see the limit cycle changing in the phase portrait, and of course we plot that in the 3D bifurcation panel to build up that bifurcation diagram. So I hope you get a good sense of, I can do lots of things with that. You can now use that workspace interface to semi-automate lots of tasks such as parameter surveys, bifurcation analysis like this, and anything you can think of really. This will come to a finish soon. Yeah, so that's finished. There's our bifurcation diagram. It's a bit messy because it has some of the old plots on it. I can clear that and run it again, and we'll get a slightly cleaner version. There's our critical value, the onset of the oscillations, and now the oscillations growing. Time portrait, phase portrait, auxiliary panel, that's changing as well, and the solar panel of course. But what you're really interested in is this bifurcation diagram. Okay, so the GUI, the workspace interface, also allows us to look at the variables, as I mentioned. So we could, if we wanted to, extract that data into the workspace. So we can say t equals GUI.t. GUI.t is the time steps. Let's get e. Let's say e equals GUI.vars.e, and now I can make a new figure and I can plot, in that figure I can plot T versus E. There's my figure, there's my time course of the excitatory firing rate, E, and let's compare it to what we have in the GUI. So we can see they are indeed the same thing as you would expect. So that's how you extract simulated data out of the GUI and into your Matlab workspace. There are also, the final thing I should show you is the panels. Each of the display panels is also accessible via the GUI.panels field. So we could look at GUI.panels.timePortrait, for example, and it exposes the axes. So if you want to control the axes or copy something from the axes, you have access to it from here. The options represent the menu options. So let's try that. Let's look at the menu options. Alright, so currently points is off. Time points menu is off. Let's turn it on from the command line. Options dot points equals on, and that will turn on the time points for that particular panel. Not the other panels, because we just specified this panel. We can turn them off again. Alright, there we go, now they're off. Yeah, so there's all panels that are currently loaded in the GUI have you can access something of that particular data. In this case, the bifurcation diagram, you can get a copy of the axis. So yeah, like I said, with that interface between the workspace and the graphical application, I hope you get a sense of how you can quickly conduct quick and dirty analyses, if you like, without doing very much programming at all. Just some activity on the command line, and you can automate a lot of this graphical exploration and get some nice results without having to start writing custom scripts. So with that, I'll end this lecture and let you have a try of that yourself.